within the schools of calisthenics that I see a lot, there's kind of two big groups. So the first one I see is very much taking the gym and bringing it into calisthenics. This is where you're getting the fancy kind of gymnastics type skills. You're getting people who are training for muscle mass almost exclusively, and you get people who are, doing the heaviest weighted pull-ups they can, and really just focusing on those kind of like the high intensity strength movements. And then you get, on the other side, you kind of get this old school, I guess I'll call it, mindset where you're getting people doing extremely high reps of very basic exercises. So this is when you're going to see people do 300 bodyweight squats, 200 push-ups, 100 pull-ups, that kind of thing. But the thing I don't see a lot in, I guess, conventional fitness media is I call it the other stuff, the bouncy stuff, the things that can't easily be categorized in a way that people understand in this kind of fitness world where we silo everything off. So I've been getting into kettlebells, and ballistic exercises are pretty par for the course there. Done for high reps, done for anaerobic conditioning. Snatch, swing, jerk, clean, thrusters. All these exercises are, pretty par for the course for most people doing kettlebell exercises. They're getting fatigued, but they're still able to do this for dozens, sometimes hundreds of reps. And so that to me really struck my interest because it went against a lot of the conventional wisdom I had been seeing for so long about how power training works, blah, blah, blah. You've got to lift a certain weight, low rep, kind of gym bro, grind it out mentality. That kind of opened my eyes to what other sort of exercises there are out there. And the two big things I've seen, there's kind of the burpees and plyometrics out in the West, which you'll see a little bit of. And then you are seeing, at the same time, there's kind of a corresponding thing out, particularly in South Asia, of a lot of these traditional calisthenics exercises. There's a few people trying to perpetuate them and kind of bring them to the forefront. What you're seeing with that is this interesting convergence of two very different origin points where they're actually talking about a lot of the same things. Exercises done for anaerobic conditioning and aerobic conditioning, so they're intense enough that you're actually getting your heart rate up. They're ballistic, so you're training a lot of explosiveness. You're training, plyometric abilities. You're training your body to be more elastic and springy, and then at the same time, you're getting enough intensity and enough muscle mass to develop, a decent base of power, decent base of strength, decent base of hypertrophy. And so I think the reason that these things are working and that these systems work is they're kind of the convergence point between these two extremes, right? We tend to think of things as like two sides of a coin when really it's more of a spectrum. And there's a lot of schools of thought and a lot of people, particularly in the martial arts world. So it's not that they're specifically trying to specialize in one thing. In fact, they're doing the opposite. They're trying to go for the most generalist effects possible. So the first example I'm going to do is one of the famous Pelwan Hindu wrestling exercises, the Hindu squat. So the way I see it done conventionally is people just think it's a squat with very raised heels, which is the beginning of it, but that's not exactly how it's done. So the way that traditionally it's done is it's actually a ballistic exercise. It's very rhythmic. You're doing it for high reps. You are trying to get your heart rate up, trying to build stamina, and you're also building a lot of springiness in the muscles of your lower body. But we'll see if I can do it on pretty squishy dirt and grass. So I'm coming here, I'm moving here, right? So that's kind of the beginning basis of it, right? So you can already see I'm kind of doing a little controlled bounce, using that stretch reflex, building a lot of elasticity. Wouldn't recommend on mud. Ugh. You kind of hear the squish. Why do these things work? If you look at a lot of Pelwan wrestlers, they're not doing that much of what you call traditional strength training. Like, they are doing some, but these people have pretty massive leg development, obviously a ton of leg strength, and yet they're not using that much, weighted leg exercises other than their body weight that they're doing for hundreds of reps. The question that I asked was, really, how is this different than just normal, really high rep calisthenics conditioning, doing 100 body weight squats? Like, why is it so different? Why does it seem to have a different effect? I think it breaks down to a few things. So we need to think about motor unit recruitment in the sense that there are motor units within your body that activate depending on the intensity of an exercise. So traditionally the ways that we get those, really all these three strength training methods are doing is getting to those large motor units in 3 different ways, right? So the first one you've got just lifting heavy loads. That's pretty straightforward. The second one you get is where you're training to failure, and you basically get to the point where you've fried your smaller muscle motor units, you've fried your slow twitch muscle fibers, which are not very strong but can go for a long time, but eventually they do give out. And so you're going to see that with the high rep. They're pushing to the brink of failure, and then that's when you start to engage the larger muscle fibers and larger muscle units. This is basically the principle of bodybuilding. They're not necessarily lifting heavy weights, they're just pushing close to or at failure to start engaging those final muscle fibers. But the third way, which is where these kind of ballistic exercises come in, is explosive movements. So it takes a lot of force to do a ballistic movement. Like, even if you're not lifting a very heavy load, you're still moving it very quickly, and it takes a lot of effort, it takes large motor units. And so what I think they're doing is that these exercises are basically exploiting that principle in order to really get that intense stimulus while not having to work with heavy loads, which has a lot of benefits to it. So you're kind of getting a bit of the best of both worlds, I would say. So it's interesting, particularly with training with burpees. I've been doing a lot of push-ups, but I noticed that as I've begun to integrate the more, I guess, springy, ballistic type explosive push-ups, my push-up strength in general has increased a lot. And I think the reason is I am training my body to engage in the stress reflex of my chest. I'm training it to be more ballistic, more explosive, and to really tap into those large motor units. That's where you get a lot of carryover. So you're getting the beauty of, you're still getting that conditioning effect, you're getting your heart rate up, but you're also engaging these large motor units. So you're going to get some carryovers to endurance, you're going to get some carryovers to strength, and then you're also going to get some of these, I guess, harder to train for athletic qualities like agility, mobility, and tendon strength. And that's the other reason I kind of want to talk about this, is I think that done right, these ballistic exercises, even though I think people tend to shy away from them because they think of them as an injury risk, which if you're going away over your head, you absolutely can. You're exposing your body to really high impact forces potentially. But I think what people don't understand is that done right, you're actually preparing your body to better absorb those impact forces and to redirect them rather than just, shocking the structures of your body. So I don't think it's realistic to avoid all impact during your daily life. I just don't think that's possible. You literally can't. You can't decide when you're going to fall off a bicycle, or if you're doing BJJ, you can't decide if you're going to get slammed on the mat, that kind of thing. You can't decide if you're going to trip and fall, and you have to catch yourself with your hands while you're skiing. So rather than avoiding these impacts that are to a certain extent unavoidable because life is a contact sport, it makes more sense to be training my tissues, my muscles, my nerves, my bones to know what to do in that situation so that I can minimize the risk of injury, as well as getting that high rep work that you need for tendon strength, right? I just encourage people to at least integrate a little bit of it. Even if it's just, I'm going to learn how to do a clap push-up, or I'm going to learn a muscle up. Those things are really going to have pretty powerful effects in your training. And again, I encourage you, once you get to the point of you can produce this powerful movement very consistently with good form, then you can start slowly integrating it at like a higher rep level. I don't want to see people doing janky ass CrossFit muscle ups where they're just smashing their elbows into pieces. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about learning how to do these explosive movements under load, building that anaerobic capacity, because a lot of athletic activities really rely on those skills. But yeah, in conclusion, I'd say don't get too tied up into the siloing off of fitness. Realize that there's a spectrum. Realize that there's a lot of perspectives that you probably haven't considered yet, and just go out and explore it. And if you're somebody like me who doesn't really care too much about one specific athletic quality so much as kind of getting the bang for the buck, I really think you should integrate this as a large part of your training. So particularly if you're a hybrid athlete, if you're doing any sort of blend of strength and endurance activities, you really need to be considering integrating these things, because otherwise you're just leaving a lot on the table in terms of your recovery capacity and your performance.